Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take the things you're interested in, the resources you share, and we really boil it down to the knowledge that counts. Think of it as your fast track to getting clued in.
And today, this deep dive is, well, specifically for you, the learner. You sent over some material on Israeli Krav Maga, and we're going to unpack the core ideas.
Exactly. Now, when people hear Krav Maga, they probably picture intense fight scenes.
All right, action movies.
Yeah, exactly. But what we're digging into today, just for you, is that it's actually, well, it's a much broader thing. It's about really understanding violence, figuring out how to avoid it if you possibly can.
Which is key.
And just feeling, empowered to make smart choices when things get tense.
So the main thing we're looking at here is the book Krav Maga Fundamental Strategies. It's by David Kahn.
Okay.
And what's really valuable is that Kahn is, he's a very high-ranking instructor. He's got direct ties back to the founders of Krav Maga.
Ah, so we're getting it pretty close to the source, though.
Yeah, exactly. We're focusing on that foundational thinking behind the whole system.
Right. So the learner, your mission, should you accept it, is to walk away from this understanding the core strategic thinking, the stuff that underpins Krav Maga for self-defense and just, everyday life.
Or after those key takeaways, right? The actionable bits.
Yeah, those aha moments that actually stick. Okay, let's get into it. What's the absolute bedrock philosophy here?
Well, what's fascinating right off the bat is that the most fundamental teaching in Krav Maga, it's actually about not using it.
Really?
Yeah, unless there's absolutely no other choice. The main focus, the primary thing, is on strategies for disengaging, de-escalating, getting out of potentially violent situations.
Huh. That's almost the opposite of what you'd expect, isn't it? You think self-defense, you think immediate countermove.
Precisely. And the founder, Emmy Lichtenfeld, he put this huge emphasis on humility, on steering clear of fights you don't need to be in. He famously said, the hardest thing is to be humble.
Humble. That's not the first word that jumps to mind when you think about, self-defense prep.
No, but if you kind of zoom out, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Real strength.
Yeah.
Often it's in controlling a situation without having to use force.
I see.
Krav Maga itself, the physical part, is described as this: fierce, optimum orchestration of counterviolence designed to prevail against any aggressor.
Okay.
So the capability's there, absolutely, if it's needed. But the main goal, avoid needing it.
Got it. So it's the last resort. But when it becomes that last resort, what are the core principles then? How does it work?
Right. So when you're forced into it, Krav Maga prioritizes using your natural, adaptable, gross motor movement.
Gross motor, meaning like big movements, not fiddly stuff.
Exactly. The big muscle stuff that tends to hold up better under stress. It moves away from really intricate techniques that might just fall apart when you're under pressure.
Makes sense.
The focus is defending and counterattacking at the same time, simultaneously, and targeting the most vulnerable parts of the attacker's body with, well, the book calls it extreme prejudice.
Extreme prejudice. Wow. That definitely paints a picture. Serious intent.
It does. And a really crucial part is there are no set rules, like in sports.
Right.
It's designed to adapt to you, your strengths, the specific situation. It doesn't force you into some rigid mold. That adaptability, which comes from Emmy Lichtenfeld, is seen as a core strength.
And we should probably mention Grandmaster Haim Giddin, too, right? He played a big role.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Grandmaster Giddin was actually appointed by Emmy Lichtenfeld himself as his successor. He's the highest-ranking instructor in the world.
Wow.
And since Emmy passed away, Grandmaster Giddin has kept evolving the system, refining it, but always sticking to Emmy's principle that it has to work for, everyone. Any potential defender.
So it's not static. It's constantly being updated based on, real life.
Exactly. And the focus stays firmly on civilian self-defense. It's framed as a defensive shield against violence, not something you use to start trouble.
A shield, not a sword.
Precisely. The goal is to develop what the book calls autonomic responses. Actions that become not second nature, but first nature.
First nature. So, even more instinctive than second nature, like breathing.
That's the ideal, yeah. As instinctive as your very first reaction. And the ultimate aim, look, when violence is unavoidable, and importantly, legally justifiable.
Right, the legal part is key.
Absolutely. The aim is to never hesitate in using overwhelming force. And that could, in extreme circumstances, include actions causing serious injury or even death if the situation and the principle of proportional defense demand it.
Proportionality. Got it.
The idea underneath is to inflict such a heavy physical price on an attacker who just won't listen to reason that they're stopped. immediately.
Okay, that really clarifies the core philosophy. It's deep. Yeah. Now, the book also talks about strategic thinking, situational awareness.
Yeah.
How does that fit in?
Yeah, that's where the foreword by Paul Carlene is really insightful. He talks about developing this ability um, to quickly size up a situation and mentally run through possible
Like
responses.
pre-planning.
Sort of. He uses the phrase previewed in my mind, basically picturing what he might do if danger popped up in different places, a store, a parking lot, just walking down the street.
So it's about cultivating this kind of mental readiness, always scanning the environment.
Exactly that. It's the skill of seeing an actual attack unfold and instantly comparing it to those scenarios you've already mentally played out.
Ah, so you react faster, more informed.
Much faster. Carlene really stresses connecting the general ideas of Krav Maga to specific everyday situations, constantly planning, envisioning responses in different places. It's not just about hitting pads in a gym, it's developing a proactive mindset.
That makes a ton of sense. Running mental fire drills, almost. Okay, let's shift to disengagement strategies. As you said, avoiding the fight is goal number one. What are the core principles there?
So, Chapter 1 really hammers this home. Emotional control is the single most important thing, the staunchest pillar, it calls it.
Emotional control.
Yeah. Prioritizing de-escalation, finding peaceful solutions, physically getting away from a threat that's paramount. And the book makes this important distinction between social violence,
Social violence, what's that?
where the goal is often about like establishing dominance, saving face, maybe some pushing and shoving, but not necessarily causing serious harm,
Okay.
versus what it calls raw violence, where the aggressor fully intends to seriously injure you or worse. Understanding that difference in intent is like step one in choosing how to respond.
So figuring out what the other person is actually trying to do is the first key.
Exactly. And managing your own reaction, especially anger, is critical. You don't want to escalate something that could maybe be diffused.
Right.
The book even brings in Massimo Pigliucci's work on Stoicism, recalling Seneca calling anger temporary madness.
Ah, temporary madness. I like that.
Yeah, the whole Stoic idea of controlling your emotions instead of being controlled by them fits perfectly here.
So even if you're totally justified in being angry, letting that anger drive your actions might not be the smartest move for staying safe.
Precisely. The idea is to use what they call cognitive restructuring, basically, changing your thought patterns to manage that anger, stop things from blowing up.
Okay.
And when de-escalation seems possible, Krav Maga promotes something called de-escalation communication, using compassionate, non-violent ways to try and resolve things.
How does that work in practice? Like, what does it actually look like?
Well, it's about taking control of the situation by disrupting what the book calls the aggressor's script.
Your script.
Yeah, like stopping their planned moves right at the start. And often you can do that just by presenting yourself as calm, controlled. That can really throw off their expectations.
It's like you're not playing the role they expected you to play, so it knocks them off balance.
Exactly. And the book also talks about two main types of aggressors. You've got the reckless, sort of hot-headed types, and then the more calculating ones, like bullies or predators. And they often need different approaches. With a hothead, you might try acknowledging their feelings without agreeing with their aggression.
Right.
With a predator type, you need to set really clear boundaries, show you're not an easy mark.
So what are some specific tactics? Like, what do you actually say or do for verbal de-escalation?
Well, creating physical distance is always the best first move if you can. But you could also try to narrow the psychological distance, showing you're willing to find a peaceful way out.
Oh.
Things like showing sincerity, using neutral eye contact assertive, not aggressive, maintaining a confident expression, and adopting a clear, firm de-escalation communication stance.
Stance matters too.
Yeah, and the book quotes Sean T. Smith, who basically says people react to their perceptions. If all they see from you is hostility, that's likely what you'll get back.
So projecting this kind of non-threatening control is the goal.
Yes, and specific verbal tactics. Using respectful terms like sir or ma'am, nodding to show you're listening. Maybe calmly saying things like, hey, please just listen for a moment. Or even offering a quick apology if it might defuse things right then and there. It's also really important to be aware of what the book calls criminal testing rituals.
Testing rituals.
Yeah, small things an aggressor might do to test your boundaries, see if you're likely to be a victim, like moving into your personal space deliberately, or trying to play on your sympathy.
Wow. It sounds like a really delicate balance, being firm but not making it worse.
It is. And the chapter wraps up by circling back to Amy's idea, paraphrased by Sean T. Smith. Real peace comes through strength.
Mm-hmm.
but not just physical strength.
Right, the mental strength.
Yeah, the mental strength to recognize when something feels like an attack, but is actually low stakes, and to respond peacefully, even when you're feeling provoked. And just the wisdom to take basic steps to avoid trouble in the first place.
Okay. Now, the book specifically talks about road rage, too, which sadly a lot of us have probably encountered. What's the Krav Maga strategy for handling that kind of situation?
Yeah, it gives a clear definition of road rage, lists the typical aggressive behaviors. But what really hits home are the statistics it shares.
Oh.
For instance, it points out that a huge chunk, like 66% of traffic fatalities, are linked to aggressive driving.
66%. Wow.
And firearms are involved in something like 37% of reported road rage incidents. It's shocking. Over just 7 years, hundreds of murders and literally thousands of injuries were directly blamed on road rage.
Those numbers are just staggering. Really alarming.
They are, and a 2019 survey mentioned in the book found most drivers admit to having road rage sometimes. Common reactions: honking, yelling, gestures.
Yeah, we've all seen it. Or done it.
Right, and what's also telling is how few of these incidents, like only 10%, ever get reported to the police.
So why do people get so incredibly angry behind the wheel? What's going on there?
Well, the book cites the American Psychological Association, suggesting a car can give people this false sense of, like, power, protection, anonymity.
Like a boa.
Yeah, and a feeling of easy escape. So people might act in ways they just wouldn't face to face. Throw in stress from traffic, other drivers being careless, maybe some anger you're already carrying around, high life stress. It's a recipe for it.
So it's the car environment plus our own emotional state.
Exactly. The good news, though, is that things like behavioral therapy have shown real success in helping people dial back aggressive driving.
That's hopeful.
But ultimately, the book brings it back to Amy's main goal: to walk in peace. Having the self-awareness and the confidence to just disengage from road rage stuff, to recognize the potential consequences just aren't worth whatever minor slight sets you off.
Right back to avoidance. Okay, let's broaden that out again. Conflict avoidance generally, and how our bodies react under extreme stress. What does Krav Maga teach about that? What happens to us physiologically?
Well, common sense and street smarts, as the book puts it, are your best primary defenses. Yeah. Just understanding the potential offer consequences of violence should make avoidance the default.
Sure.
So mental conditioning, rehearsing de-escalation, practicing walking away, those are really crucial proactive things.
Because when stress hits hard, our bodies might actually betray us.
Right.
Might hinder our response.
They can, yeah. Under extreme stress, your heart rate can just skyrocket from normal resting to like 200, even 300 beats per minute in really intense situations.
Whoa.
And that directly messes with your coordination, especially fine motor skills, complex movements. At the same time, your muscles tense up, adrenaline floods your system.
Fight or flight.
Exactly. That's your sympathetic nervous system, the SNS, kicking in. It releases stress hormones, gives you a very short burst of strength and speed, maybe, but it seriously impairs your ability to think clearly, analytically, and do complex things.
So the system designed to save us can actually have major drawbacks.
It can.
Yeah.
And how much the SNS activates depends on things like how big you think the threat is, how much time you feel you have, how confident you are in your skills, even just how tired you are.
Okay.
Interestingly, there seems to be this optimal heart rate zone for performance under stress, roughly 115 to 145 beats per minute.
Optimal.
Yeah, in that range, you can function pretty well. But above 145, skills start degrading fast. And at really high rates, some people might just freeze up completely. Catatonic.
Freeze. Wow. The book mentions other common responses too, like tunnel vision, auditory exclusion. Why did those happen?
Yeah, those are all classic physiological stress responses. Tunnel vision is your body prioritizing your central vision, maybe losing peripheral awareness.
Right.
Auditory exclusion is when your hearing seems to diminish as a vision takes over. You might also get weird perceptions of time speeding up or slowing down. Your brain, trying to cope, might even throw random distracting thoughts at you.
And what about this behavioral looping thing it mentions?
Yeah. That's when someone under extreme stress might just repeat an action or a phrase over and over, almost like they're stuck, struggling to process what's happening.
Okay, so how do we overcome these things?
Well, the book really stresses developing attack pattern recognition, training your brain to quickly identify common attacks.
So you react faster.
Exactly. It helps bypass the slower thinking part of your brain and triggers those pre-trained instinctive reactions much quicker. Confidence in your training also helps delay the worst effects of the SNS kicking in too hard.
So recognizing the threat fast and having trained responses ready is key to managing that stress response.
Precisely. Your subconscious mind processes stuff way faster than your conscious brain. Realistic training, visualization, these are huge for reducing anxiety and cutting down reaction time. The book even suggests that with enough training, someone might react in under a quarter of a second.
A quarter of a second, that's incredibly fast. And confidence.
Hmm.
It's not just feeling good, it's a real strategic edge here.
Absolutely. Confidence, especially the kind built on solid, realistic training, helps you see threats more clearly, keeps anxiety lower. Even if your first move isn't perfect, confidence lets you adapt, keep going.
Right.
The book mentions Grandmaster Giddens' approach, constantly learning, refining things based on both training and analyzing real fights. Ultimately, Krav Maga aims to sharpen your instincts so your subconscious can basically take over under pressure. Recognizing those tiny pre-attack signs, the kinesic indicators.
Kinesic indicators.
Yeah, like clenched hands, shifting weight to the balls of the feet, a slight forward lean, coiled shoulder, stiff neck. Recognizing those lets you almost cheat the normal action-reaction delay.
Let's dig into that realistic training idea more. The book really emphasizes it. What makes training realistic in Krav Maga?
Well, realistic training is about hardwiring those instinctive movements into your brain, so your body just does the right thing without you having to consciously think about it when stress is high. It means simulating real attacks as closely as you safely can, so you understand the speed, the intensity, the sheer force involved, which can be very different from, say, the more controlled, maybe choreographed moves in some traditional martial arts. Those might not work so well in a chaotic street situation.
So it's about closing that gap between the training mat and messy reality.
Exactly. The book really highlights progressing gradually with the intensity, always with a good instructor focused on safety. But eventually, the training has to involve determined resistance from partners.
Determined resistance.
Yeah, full speed, full power punches, kicks, chokes, grabs, but done in a controlled, safe way.
That sounds pretty intense. What's the main goal of that level of realism?
The big goal is mental and physical conditioning, getting you to a place where you can manage panic, channel that adrenaline surge effectively. It's like stress inoculation.
Stress inoculation, like getting a vaccine for stress.
Kind of. Repeatedly facing realistic, demanding scenarios builds mental toughness. It helps you develop this mental dominance over fear, a belief you can handle an attacker, but crucially, balancing that with humility, not getting overconfident or underestimating anyone.
Right.
Realistic training also gives you a much clearer sense of your own physical limits under maximum effort, which, as the book points out, is usually a very short burst, maybe a dozen seconds of all-out fighting.
Wow, only about a dozen seconds. That's sobering. Okay, let's pivot to something really critical on the legal side of self-defense. How does Krav Maga philosophy and practice mesh with the law?
Yeah, this is super important. The book makes it clear. Even if you successfully defend yourself physically, you could still face legal trouble, civil or criminal.
Right.
And you'll need to explain what you did and why to people, police, maybe a jury, who probably know very little about self-defense or what a real attack is like. So consistent statements about what happened and why you reacted that way are vital.
Krav Maga started in a very different legal environment, didn't it, historically?
That's right. Pre-WWII Slovakia. For Jewish communities facing violence then, survival was often the only concern because legal protection was minimal or non-existent.
Okay.
But the book stresses, today, in most places, the rule of law is paramount. So understanding the legal boundaries of self-defense is absolutely crucial.
So what are some of the key legal concepts the book flags?
Well, a fundamental one is imminent harm, meaning a clear, demonstrable physical danger that requires an immediate counterforce.
Immediate, not too early, not too late.
Exactly. Not premature, not retaliatory. Many places use a standard like immediately necessary for using force. And self-defense is usually an affirmative defense.
Meaning
You admit you used force, but you argue it was legally justified because you were protecting yourself. The burden of proof often shifts to you to show you acted in self-defense, that you weren't the aggressor.
So you basically have to convince them you reasonably believe you were in real danger.
Yes, the standard is often apparent necessity.
Hmm.
Your belief that you needed to use force can be a valid defense, even if, looking back, you were mistaken about the danger.
Oh, interesting.
The key is whether a reasonable person in your shoes would have believed the same thing about the other person's intent and actions. You generally also have the right to defend someone else facing imminent harm, though state laws vary on the details.
So what specific things do you need to be able to articulate to justify using counterviolence?
You need to show the elements of intent, capability, opportunity, and no preclusion. Basically, you reasonably believe the attacker intended harm, had the ability to cause it, had the immediate chance to do it, and there was no reasonable way for you to escape.
Unless you're in a stand your ground state.
Right, where the duty to retreat might not apply. And then crucially, the force you use must be reasonable and proportional to the threat you perceived.
Proportional.
Yeah, using way more force than necessary is usually unlawful. You generally can't use deadly force unless you reasonably believe you're facing death or serious bodily harm.
So explaining why you did what you did is absolutely critical, especially for someone trained.
Absolutely. If you, say, used a knee strike, you need to explain clearly why that specific action, that level of force, was necessary right then. The book notes trained individuals are often held to a higher standard in explaining themselves.
That makes sense.
You need to articulate why counter-violence was the only option. No reasonable alternatives. Things like size difference, gender strength differences, age, the location, whether the attacker seemed skilled, had a weapon, had friends, all that factors into what's considered reasonable.
What about this idea of mutual combat? That sounds like a legal minefield.
It really can be. Mutual combat, basically, agreeing to fight, generally cancels out your right to claim self-defense if things go bad.
So if a court thinks you both agreed to duke it out, you can't claim self-defense later.
Generally, no, if it's seen as a consensual fair fight. But how mutual combat is defined varies a lot by state. Proving you didn't agree usually means showing you didn't start it, tried to avoid it, and ran out of nonviolent options.
So even if you end up fighting, if it looks like you agreed to it, your self-defense claim gets shaky.
Exactly. And the book warns that even effective Krav Maga techniques might be legally problematic if they seem disproportionate. Like, breaking someone's arm for just a push could be seen as excessive.
Right.
So sometimes a less forceful tactic that still stops the immediate threat might be smarter, legally speaking. It also touches on risks with control, holds potential battery, or false imprisonment charges.
Yeah.
And ground fighting. Again, Krav Maga advises avoiding the ground, historically because of multiple attackers.
So if you do end up controlling someone on the ground.
The safest bet, legally, is often to disengage if possible and call the police. And be super careful about turning your back. The main message is, understand threat analysis and the law. That's your shield. Make informed choices, know how to explain why your actions were necessary, balancing safety with legal reality. And remember, even if you win a criminal case, you might still face a civil lawsuit.
Wow. Okay, that's a huge amount to consider. Let's shift focus now to Chapter 3 in the book, Defensive Engagement and Disengagement Strategies. What are the main principles here?
The big picture in this chapter is taking proactive, practical steps to just avoid harm altogether. It keeps coming back to recognizing threats early, avoiding confrontation if you can, and maybe preempting an attack if it's absolutely clear violence is coming and unavoidable.
Right, avoidance again.
The book lists 6 common sense safety points, but the most basic, most effective one, just get yourself out of a potentially bad situation before anything physical happens.
Seems obvious, but maybe easy to forget in the moment. Now, if avoidance fails, how do you spot an attack coming? What are the warning signs?
This is all about perception and recognition. Honing your ability to read hostile body language, other cues that show an aggressor has decided to get violent, even before they move.
So you see it coming.
Yeah, recognizing those pre-attack signals lets you act while they're still in the strategy stage, not waiting until they're fully launching the attack. Getting good at spotting these signs helps override that natural startle response. 2, letting you react with trained moves faster. Shortens the whole action-reaction time.
Okay, so what are some specific pre-violence indicators, those nonverbal kinesic signs?
The book gives a whole list. Obvious stuff like clenched fists, clenched teeth, sweating, faster breathing.
Okay.
But also subtle things. Pupil dilation, a shift in posture like leaning forward, weight moving to the balls of the feet.
Getting ready to move.
Exactly. Coiling a shoulder, blading the body like they're about to strike, stiff neck muscles, facial stuff like sneering or puckered lips, changes in breathing, puffing up, face flushing, or sometimes going pale, which can mean advanced fear.
Pale. Interesting.
Yeah. And eye movements, maybe a quick pupil constriction looking at you, then dilation as they decide to act. Or that feeling they're looking through you, not at you. But the book cautions, really experienced fighters might hide these signs better.
And even pupil changes can be a clue. Seems hard to spot.
It can be, especially with dark eyes. But yeah, pupils react unconsciously to mental states. Constriction can mean dislike, hostility. Dilation can happen with surprise or making a decision. That quick dilation then constriction shift might mean they're processing a hostile event, getting ready to act. Plus other subtle energy shifts, maybe a sudden adrenaline dump you can almost feel.
And there are specific signs someone might be carrying a weapon, too.
Yes, definitely. The book lists several. Things like wearing a watch on their non-dominant arm, freeing up the dominant hand.
Ah, okay.
Obvious bulges, loose clothes, especially around the waist, visible clips, clothes hanging unevenly. Someone trying to hide one side of their body, maybe behind a leg or arm or under a jacket.
Right,
Constantly touching an area where a weapon might be. Keeping a hand on it while running.
right.
Palming something, holding it hidden in their hand, making that hand useless for other things. Crossing arms to hide a blade behind the forearm. The common theme is accessibility. Their actions suggest they're keeping something ready.
If a fight seems like it's really about to happen, what's the recommended starting stance in Krav Maga?
The basics are a bladed posture body angled to be a smaller target. Weight on the balls of your feet for quick movement. Hands up, ready to defend and attack.
Okay.
A common way is the modified outlet stance or low ready, palms facing the threat, maybe around chest level. Shows awareness, but isn't necessarily super aggressive looking.
Beyond sight, are there sounds or other senses that can signal danger?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Auditory signs are crucial, spoken threats, obviously, but also the sound of footsteps behind you, the click of a knife opening, the sound of a gun being racked.
Chilling.
And beyond sight and sound, just general awareness, trusting your gut, noticing suspicious behavior, feeling watched, seeing erratic actions suggesting drugs or alcohol, realizing you're being surrounded, spotting weird shadows, being in a known bad area, seeing someone target glancing, looking repeatedly at a specific spot on your body, even watching how bystanders react. Locals often sense trouble first.
The book also mentions the defender's advantage. What's that about?
Right. Even when you're defending, there's often this tiny window of opportunity right when the attacker commits to their first move. They become momentarily vulnerable. If
Oh.
you hesitate or don't see it, you can get hurt.
Hmm.
But skilled fighters,
Yeah.
they're good at spotting and exploiting that split second to launch a really precise counterattack using recognition, timing, distance, and the right combative.
And that leads us right into the core concept of retzev. Can you break that down? What exactly is retzev?
Retzev. It's fundamental. It's basically a seamless, continuous onslaught of attacks. The book compares it to a sniper rifle that, after the first hit, just keeps firing aim shots automatically.
Wow, nonstop.
Yeah, it's described as brutal, highly effective counter-violence. Developed and refined through real street fights, real combat.
Yeah.
Once your first counter hits, you launch a series of follow-ups, one after another, constantly adjusted based on how the attacker reacts or doesn't react.
So it's not just one block and one punch. It's a relentless flow designed to completely overwhelm them.
Exactly. The strategy involved what the book calls untamed, targeted counter-violence, aiming attacks to seriously damage vital points, organs.
Yeah.
Things like chokes, joint breaks meant to incapacitate instantly, forceful takedowns to end it decisively.
Okay.
The focus is on systematic damage to stop the attacker fast, not just getting into a back-and-forth fight. The idea is that offensive capability is crucial for defense. Often it means a decisive first strike causing anatomical damage,
Right.
followed immediately by that continuous retzev. Injure them quickly, injure them repeatedly, until they are no longer a threat.
The book also talks about facing bigger or more skilled attackers. What's the approach there?
The main strategy is to break down their physical structure, often using takedowns to get them on the ground while you stay standing. That lets you deliver much more damaging blows because the ground absorbs all the energy, there's no give.
And this idea of injuring first keeps coming up. Why is that so central?
It's critical because, as the book says, whoever lands the first significant injury usually gains a huge advantage, especially if you follow up by putting them down, making them unable to continue.
Makes sense.
A successful first hit creates openings you can exploit. The body reacts predictably to certain kinds of damage, spinal reflexes, things like that.
Yeah.
A hit to the groin or stomach might make them double over, exposing their neck or spine or kidneys.
Ah, okay.
The strategy is use your closest weapon fist, elbow, knee, foot against their closest vulnerable target to cause the fastest, most traumatic injury possible.
So the overall goal is just prevail through this overwhelming nonstop counterattack.
Exactly. Compromise their ability to attack or defend. Retzev is called a unilateral paroxysm of counterviolence. Realistic, full-speed training that simulates debilitating wounds is key to developing this. The core idea of anatomical targeting is that injury breaks down structure and function. which creates more opportunities for injury via retzev. The goal is trauma, superficial or long-term, delivered efficiently, shortest path, least time to disable the threat. This works regardless of size or skill differences. Successive hits become more damaging. Use gross motor movements targeting vulnerable spots. Sequential injury is effective retzev. Keep damaging until the threat's gone. But there's a caution. Just attacking wildly without defending leaves you open too.
The book then gets really specific about injuries, starting with the skull and brain. Why go into that level of anatomical detail?
Well, understanding the potential damage helps you make informed decisions in the moment, and critically, helps you justify your actions later if needed.
Ah, the legal justification again.
Right. The book points out head injuries from blunt force are a major global problem. Assaults cause a significant chunk of traumatic brain injuries. Skull fractures happen surprisingly often in head trauma. Head injuries are a leading cause of death for people under 45. And a blow to the head often involves neck and body movement, risking other injuries. Even one punch has a risk of skull fracture. The impact creates a shock wave, disrupts brain function, affects vital systems. It mentions the contre-coup effect, brain hitting the opposite side of the skull.
Bed shaking jelly in a jar.
Exactly, that analogy is used. Neurons get damaged easily. It lists common injuries, concussions, simple fractures, serious temporal protrusion injuries hitting an artery, diffuse axonal injury, brainstem damage, various bleeds like epidural hematomas.
Okay. It also covers injuries to the nose, ears, jaw, and the vital throat and neck area.
Yep. Nose hits cause reflex tearing, blinding vision, plus bleeding, gagging, disrupting their ability to protect themselves. Ear strikes cause disorientation, can even be fatal if the head jolts violently, damaging the spinal cord. The jaw can fracture or dislocate easily, and the throat neck absolutely critical. Larynx trauma can range from minor to lethal. Air can escape into the neck. Side neck blows can damage cervical vertebrae, spinal cord paralysis, or death.
And finally, the torso, liver, kidneys, groin, the vulnerable spots.
Correct. Liver's on the right, under the ribs. Vulnerable to fatal bleeding. It's linked to the autonomic nervous system, so a good hit can trigger a kind of shutdown.
How do you hit it effectively?
The book suggests a punch, palm heel, kick, or knee under the right ribs, slightly upward angle, causes internal pressure changes. Kidneys are in the back, below the ribs. Very painful if hit hard hooks, knees, heel kicks can cause collapse. And the groin, well, everyone knows that's a key target.
Yeah.
Blunt trauma there can instantly take someone down, though loose pants might offer a slight buffer. The testicles have little protection. High density of pain receptors hijacks the vagus nerve. Symptoms: nausea, tears, dizziness, collapse. Pain signals travel fast. Endorphins drop, causing headache, nausea. Brain keeps abs convulsed. Increased heart rate, temperature, sweating. Usually it's bruising, but rupture, hematomas, even testicular torsion where it twists, cutting off blood supply can happen.
Oof. Okay, the chapter then covers specific defenses like against kicks and revisits that last resort idea.
Yeah, it mentions specific ways to block or evade common kicks, always combining it with a counterattack, often to the kicker's vulnerable knee. And yes, it hammers home the last resort principle again. Counterviolence only when physically assaulted, after avoidance, de-escalation, escape have failed or aren't possible. Understand your own triggers. Try to eliminate triggers for just social, ego-driven violence. Indecision can be fatal, especially with a committed attacker.
It also brings up defending property versus personal safety, a tricky one.
Right. Legally, you can usually use reasonable, non-deadly force to defend property. But the strong advice is, prioritize your safety over stuff. Have a plan so you don't freeze or overreact if someone tries to take your wallet or phone. The law values human life way above property.
Good reminder. The chapter wraps up talking about optimizing skills and the right mindset.
Yeah, pushes learning core combatives, training against full-speed, full-force attacks with a safe partner. Watching real street violence footage carefully to grasp the actual speed and viciousness. It brings up the Israeli Defense Forces idea of quality over quantity, especially facing multiple attackers. Krav Maga is presented as optimized, instinctive, adaptable tactics. It acknowledges the history outnumbered defenders winning with better tactics, and the reality attackers don't fight fair, dangerous people exist. The core is mastering fundamental combatives, evasive moves, knowing why, how, when for each. Concepts matter, but proven tactics are vital, tactically and legally. The mindset shifts from if you need to act to how you will incapacitate, instantly seeing vulnerabilities and choosing the best tool.
It also tackles the big challenge, multiple opponents.
Yes, stresses street violence is chaotic, especially with multiple attackers. This was central to Amy's Krav Maga development from his own experiences being outnumbered. Critically, it warns against going to the ground with multiple attackers. You become an easy target for the others. The strategy is take one out, fast, debilitate them quickly.
And footwork and positioning are key too.
Absolutely critical. Stepping off the direct line of an attack is huge for defense and setting up counters. Good footwork, good positioning lets you defend and attack simultaneously, and that's retzev again. Finding the attacker's dead side gives you a tactical edge. Using your different ranges, long, medium, short, with evasive moves. Evasion is about getting out of the line of fire. Avoiding a hit creates your counter opportunity. Protect your centerline head, vital organs, groin. Use your environment. Bladed stance, stay on the balls of your feet for movement, reaction, balance. Constant movement makes you harder to hit.
What's the difference between blocking and parrying again?
Simple terms. Parrying redirects the force, moves it away. Blocking absorbs the force.
Okay. And are there specific ways to parry effectively?
Yeah, timing is everything, not too early, not too late. Often combine it with moving maybe a 45-degree step forward to close distance for a counter or a small step back. The parry itself is a controlled but forceful hit on their attacking arm. Moving forward is often better for stability, less exposure. Keep your arms in a good defensive shell, hands near your face.
How should hands be held in a ready stance?
Comfortable fighting stance, usually hands around eyebrow level, elbows bent maybe 70 degrees, arms slightly away from the body, not tense, moving slightly. The idea is attack their incoming limb with extreme prejudice as you parry. Parries and blocks aren't just defense, they're the start of your offense. You might even bait them, leave a small opening to draw an attack you're ready to parry and exploit.
The chapter mentions engagement ranges and some sample defenses.
Right, long-range kicks, medium punches, short elbows, grappling, even bites. Against a skilled fighter, key principles are controlling your own balance while disrupting theirs. Their center of gravity is below the navel. Try to force it outside their support base.
And it covers takedowns, throws, infighting.
Yeah. Krav Maga takedowns are often simple, effective, flowing from other moves like an eye gouge, straight into a leg sweep like a sotogari. Advanced hip throws might come later. Goal, max effect, minimum effort. Disrupt balance, get them down fast. Collapse their structure, hit a knee, sweep feet, pick up and drop. Disrupt their base, move their center of gravity. Remember, a moving target's center of gravity is dynamic. Infighting, clinching, grappling needs diverse skills. Tie-ups, strikes, takedowns, locks, chokes. A clinch is a position, not a tactic itself. MMA fighters, wrestlers excel here. Average person, often untrained in grappling. Krav Maga teaches closing distance to disable, but they might try too. So long-medium range is often preferred. MMA fighters are good at distance timing, waiting for an opening. Ground survival tactics are mentioned against tackles. Chokes, but the best defenses don't get there. Sweeps, especially on the front leg, disrupt balance. Joint locks can force them down. Heel hooks work standing too. Often you fall with them. Instinctive flailing, grabbing vulnerabilities is smart. Push-pull to control their center of gravity, ideally perpendicular to it. Disrupt support and balance at the same time. Takedowns, sweeps, throws all displaced feet, shift mass.
How do you counter throws or takedowns?
Soon as you disrupt their attempt, redirect their momentum into your throw or takedown. Use gravity, use the ground. A strong hit first can stun them, help you finish the takedown. Unbalanced people are easier to move. If your first throw fails, keep going with retzev. Seamless transitions. An attacker trying a throw creates an opening for you. That's true for all attacks. Good fighters minimize openings, but they always exist. Retzev, in action, keeps them stuck reacting inside Boyd's OTA loop, overwhelming their ability to respond. Choose combatives that feel natural, logical for you, minimizes time, streamlines tactics. Fluidity comes from honed instincts. Strike without big windups, no wasted motion. Limbs like coordinated pistons, one out, one back. Integrate tactics seamlessly. Explosive, non-telegraphed moves are harder to react to. Combine speed and power. Violent intent drives the counter-violence. Focus is savage injury, crippling, maiming, killing, if absolutely necessary and justified. Timing, Grandmaster Giddens says, is the key word. Knowing when, where, which weapon to use. Orchestrating the right move at the right instant. Colonel Boyd's OTA loop: observe, orient, decide, act. Whoever cycles faster wins. Retzev keeps them off balance, behind in their loop. Realistic training shrinks your ODA loop, closes that action-reaction gap. You get instant recognition of common attacks, punches, grabs, kicks, weapons through training. Experience helps bypass the loop. Training cuts down observation, orientation, decision, action time.
Okay, what about body reaction tactics? Instinct over thought.
Exactly. In a surprise attack, instinct has to take over. Self-defense reaction must be instinctive, reflexive. Reactive speed means deflecting or moving so they miss, and launching a simultaneous or near-simultaneous counter. Relaxation is key for speed. That comes from training, experience. Sometimes a fast, maybe technically imperfect defense is way better than a slow, thought-out perfect one.
When is the best time to attack or counterattack?
With overwhelming force, adaptive targeting. Precision, timing, power at the best moment. Attack when they advance, change position, create an opening, key counterattack ideas. Instinctive is faster. Recognize that freeze moment if someone startles you, counterattack in milliseconds. Preempt or counter when they're distracted. Change stance, drop hands, feet parallel, pull back and attack even while talking. Best moment. Often when they aggressively advance. Exception. Projectile weapon might mean closing distance. Timed counterstrikes plus evasion exploit their 1. No commitment to their attack, and 2. Pauses between moves. Untrained attackers overextend big openings. Trained strikers are faster retracting. Every attack exposes something. Lead arm leg often first. Overwhelming offense is often the best defense. Good basic skills free your mind for tactics. Parry minimally, focus on retzev counter. Power comes from speed, acceleration, body weight. Attackers often ambush. Untrained victims likely get hit. You need speed to parry avoid. If they miss, they might pause counter opportunity. Move off the line puts you where they don't expect. A miss can unbalance them. Counter immediately after a miss. Don't let them regroup. And don't stop until they're non-functional, always considering proportional force.
Ambushes sound terrifying. What's the approach there?
They exploit surprise, concealment. Awareness and preparedness can deter. Practice both overt focus and covert observation. Mentally prepare not to be provoked. Recognize ambush signs, body position, eyes, face, lean, hands. Attackers often rely on violence of action, not skill. Remember, even an average person throws blows fast. Always consider multiple attackers. For a rear naked choke ambush, tactile training, feeling it is crucial for instinctive reaction. Goal: debilitate the choker, maybe use their body as a shield. Specific footwork can turn you into them, maybe ramming a second attacker. Use their momentum for a throw, like drop seonage, then kick the other threat. Preemptive attack. It's not hitting into their attack with bad timing. A long kick is versatile for preemption before they fully launch or draw a weapon. See aggression. Kick groin or knee fast. Use footwork like to cover distance. Add power, especially if hands come up aggressively or are hidden. Don't square up. Kick as they adopt a fighting stance. Follow with retzev. Stop the attack before it starts by reading the signs. Multiple opponents again. Debilitate one fast. Watch out for tunnel vision, focusing only on one. Breaking up a fight. Security might wait. Krav Maga uses a modified weapon defense to wedge between fighters. Tuck head, dive in, secure their arms, pin them. Use a command voice. Stop fighting. Forceful, but show you're helping, not attacking. Protect yourself. They might turn on you. The chapter ends reiterating the pledge. Teach almost anyone self-defense. Hopes the strategies are useful across systems. Reminds us no two situations are identical. Need an adaptable strategy. Core techniques plus sound principles.
Wow. This has been an incredibly detailed, really insightful deep dive into Krav Maga strategy. To kind of wrap it up for you, the learner, what would you say are maybe the 2 or 3 absolute biggest takeaways from all this today?
Okay, yeah. First, definitely the absolute priority of avoidance and de-escalation.
Yeah.
Krav Maga's #1 lesson is prevent violence if possible.
Yeah.
Emotional control, strategic communication, that's huge.
Right. Avoidance first.
Second, the vital role of situational awareness.
Yeah.
Learning to recognize those pre-violence indicators. Reading cues, spotting threats early gives you time to avoid or prepare. It's crucial.
Awareness is key. Okay, number 3.
And third, I'd say the core concept of retzev, that seamless, overwhelming counterattack aimed at vulnerable spots. Understanding that principle of continuous, targeted, forceful counter provides a framework for decisive action when, avoidance just isn't an option anymore.
So for you, the learner, even without, say, years of intense physical training, just grasping these fundamental strategies gives you a powerful way to think about navigating tricky situations, making informed choices. It's about having that proactive mindset, prioritize avoidance, but know that decisive, overwhelming action is a justified and effective last resort if your safety is truly on the line.
And maybe consider how these ideas, de-escalation, reading warning signs, might apply elsewhere in life. Not just physical fights, but other conflicts, risky situations.
Good point.
And if practical training is something you're interested in, you can find info on Israeli Krav Maga centers at www.israelikrav.com or info@israelikrav.com.
And one final thought to maybe chew on. Think about how often, maybe unknowingly, we escalate things in daily life just through our own emotional reactions. What could the impact be if we consciously tried to apply that Krav Maga principle of humility, of actively avoiding unnecessary conflict? Something to consider. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.